my impression.
Oh my gosh.
And I think his body was dumped in Puget Sound.
No.
I do, and I think Octopus's Garden is telling us that that's where he is.
The song Octopus's Garden. Yeah.
I'd like to be under the sea. You know, I mean, it's kind of a creepy song if you think about it. He's swimming with the fishes.
In an Octopus's Garden with me. I remember that song. Tell us what clues did you come up with to determine that might be the case, that he was his body was disposed of in Puget Sound? How did you dig that one up?
Well, the clues are more that he's in water. But if he were killed in Seattle, which I think is where it went down, then it would probably be Puget Sound. I mean, I guess it could be Lake Washington. I mean, it could be anywhere on the West Coast. I'm just saying, like, that's the nearest body of water. And to me, the clues are pointing to that.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And his body's never been found that I know of.
Right.
You wouldn't expect it, really.
Obviously, yeah. Can you imagine?
Some people claim, it can't be murder if there's no body. And it's like, well, they never found Jimmy Hoffa. Do people really think he wasn't murdered? Like, who thinks that?
Right.
No. You don't necessarily have to find a body. I mean, the guy's been missing for 50 years. Like, at what point do you say foul play?
Yes. So, in other words, the forensic evidence shows that the last time that the real Paul was seen was sometime in 1966 in Seattle, and from that point on, he's gone missing.
Right.
Wow.
So, I mean, and legally, you know, that, 7 years is, for common law, and not common law, in the, what do you call it, help me out here, probate.
Yeah,
it's like, it's 7 years.
Yeah, as far as
somebody
as far as settling someone's estate, right.
Exactly.
Interesting.
After 7 years, like, you can say that they're dead if you don't find a body or whatever. Some jurisdictions, it's not that long. I think New York is 4 years or 3 years. It's in my book. I forgot offhand, but
okay.
Yeah, so I mean, he's been missing for so long that,
Yeah, that's a lot longer than D.B. Cooper, even. Let's put it that way.
Right, exactly. So, and for the larger agenda of why they would want to remove somebody like that, in my opinion, Paul is not a team player. There's the larger social engineering agenda, bringing in sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And, this is to further the New World Order agenda. And first, they got to break down the family. They got to break down the social norms before they can go after the nation state. And so this was the beginning of trying to tear that all apart. And Paul was also, not only a team player, because if he had been a team player, there would have been no reason to replace him, right?
Right.
So, I mean, this guy, he comes through America, and they're all against segregation. They're not going to play the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville because they're against segregation. So right there, troublemakers, right? Yeah. And then Paul also was interested in writing the film score for Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment, which was questioning the JFK assassination, questioning the official story. According to Mark Lane, he told him that he did not believe Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK, the original Paul,
yes.
not the fake, because the McCartney 2, in my opinion, is a complete Illuminati show, but, anyway. So Paul,
and of course, John Kennedy was shot in 1963 in November, but then in 1960, that was just a year before the Beatles came to America. Then, but Paul, the original Paul, was so interested in that event that he wanted to write the film score. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. So he wanted to. He's a conspiracy theorist, right? Like us.
Right. That's interesting.
And so okay, of course they're not going to like that. He was just he was talented, he was popular, he wasn't anybody's puppet. And they were just too influential, and I don't think that the powers that be wanted them to be loose cannons, going and speaking out against the Vietnam War. They were doing it in a way like they were just serious people sitting in an interview saying, we don't think the war is right, we don't think people should have to go fight if they don't want to. Well, do you think the powers that be wanted people that influential to tell the kids to not go fight Vietnam? No.
Right. Right.
So that's another one right there. So there are three things that would potentially get somebody, off.
He didn't want to go along. From what I gather, you're saying is that he had a strong enough personality, maybe the strongest personality in the Beatles, that they were worried about him and needed to replace him.
Right. Well, he was a strong personality, and it's only in revisionist history because people think Fall is Paul that they think that he's a weakling, he's not serious, he's not political. This is all what's happened post-Paul, how he's been rewritten his personality has been rewritten because Paul is a clown. And a lot of times I think he purposely tries to discredit Paul with his shenanigans.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand, sure.
Like he writes just stupid songs, and it's almost like a slap in the face to Paul, who said he would never put out crap just because he knew people would buy it. Like they had standards, incredibly high standards. Paul was always innovating with music. Like people think he was not a good musician, but that's because of Fall. Paul was very innovative. He came up with the backwards tape loops on Tomorrow Never Knows on Revolver, which is considered one of the most innovative rock songs ever. Plus, it's highly spiritual. Plus, these guys were highly spiritual, which, again, for the Illuminati, which is Luciferian, they're going to see these bright lights out there talking about spirituality, raising the vibration with their music. They're going to want to stamp the Beatles out, in my opinion.
Yes.
But, we already know John Lennon was shot. We already know there was a knife attack on George Harrison. So is it really that shocking to think that a third Beatle would be attacked?
Right. And, the interesting point that you bring up was the innovation, the sheer genius of Paul McCartney's songwriting abilities. Can you touch on some of those iconic songs that we know that Paul McCartney wrote?
Well, we know he wrote Yesterday, which it's probably the most successful pop song ever in history. It's been covered 3,000 times, Grammy Award winning. It's, number one for 11 weeks, whatever it was. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head. But that was all Paul. And he brought in a string quartet. So it's also he's totally in a pop song. It's
right.
And the label was actually going to release that song as a Paul McCartney solo song, but John Lennon wasn't going for that, so it was really such a Beatles song. But it was all Paul and totally innovative, and successful. And then Eleanor Rigby too, kind of in that same vein.
Right.
You know? And then Fall has no clue where the name Eleanor Rigby came from, and it's kind of funny, but that's in my book. And then Fall too. Here's the funny thing about Yesterday. So he says that he dreamt up Yesterday in 1965, just fully formed, like whatever. But then, you know, Paul actually performed it in 63. I mean, to not live or anything, but, you know, as he was working on it, people remembered, oh, yeah, I heard that in 63. And then he was also talking about how his thought process of how he came up with Yesterday. It's like, oh, yesterday, suddenly, like, this is how he went through coming up with the song. And then Fall's like, oh, I just thought of it. Just fully formed. Oh, but he said he called it scrambled eggs, which is funny because Paul said, no, I had Yesterday, and it was easy to rhyme Yesterday with, you know, other things in the song. And it's like, so the scrambled egg thing is just disinformation. Because Paul didn't know. Why would he know how Paul came up with this song? Oh, and then, so some other songs that have been very successful. Well, like I mentioned, The Family Way, he won a big award for. And we know that Here's Something, She's Leaving Home, which appeared on the Sgt. Pepper album post-Paul.
Mm-hmm.
It is Paul singing, 1967 on the Sgt. Pepper album. She's Leaving Home.
Interesting.
It was Paul's song, and it was proven by voice prints. But that, again, is sort of that song in the same vein, that story song, like Yesterday, like Eleanor Rigby kind of, you know, telling that story. And But Paul said that they recorded everything they wrote. So it's not surprising that there would be vocal tracks lying around that they can incorporate into later songs, possibly bass tracks. I mean, Paul played like every instrument imaginable. He even played sitar and, you know, whatever, he could pick up and play it. And so he kind of had tons of stuff laying around. And I suspect that song, you know, A Day in the Life, or that it has like the woke at, fell out of bed part.
Yeah,
you know, kind of that break, kind of that weird break. Well, I was watching Anthology or whatever it was a long time ago, and George Martin was saying, well, we wanted to have Paul contribute something to the song, so we used that little bit. And it's like, well, I thought it was weird at the time. It's like, why don't you have something a little more developed in that song? Or, you know what I mean? But it's probably all they had of Paul, and so they had to use it. Because if you incorporate Paul's songs in the later albums, you keep that illusion alive that it is Paul still around.
Exactly, because they probably were anticipating voice analysis of the voice prints just in the future, even. So they need to throw them off with some reality in there as well. It's kind of like disinformation. You know, you throw a lot of disinformation out and pepper it with the truth periodically to throw the opposition off.
Oh, there's more disinformation in this area than I've seen in anything. I mean,
yes.
And it's really dumb disinformation too. Like, nobody believes it, but it gets out there.
Let me ask you this. Let's get a little up close and personal with that story. Was there a girlfriend of Paul McCartney at the time? I don't think he was married in 1966, but
no.
Wouldn't people close to him have known or noticed the difference?
Of course they knew. Okay, so Paul was with Jane Asher at that time, and when he played the Seattle show, there was a big rumor that he was going to marry Jane Asher after the show, but he didn't, and he had no plans of getting married. He said, I'm basically scared of marriage. I don't like marriage. I don't want to get married. Like, if you watch his early interviews, and then, you know, Fall comes in and he marries Linda Eastman, you know, well, a couple of years later, but still, And then Paul too was like, he loved London. He was never going to leave England.